Om Shuklam Bharadharam Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayet Sarva Vignopashantaye Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham karishyami siddhir me sada yenakshara samamnayam adhigamya maheshwarat kritsnam vyakaranam proktam tasmai paninaye namaha vakyakaram vararuchim Bhashyakaram Patanjalim Paninim Sutrakarancha Pranatosmi Munitrayam Vagartha Viva Samprikto Vagartha Pratipattaye Jagatah Pitaro Vande Parvati Parameshwarao Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Namaste everyone, welcome to class. So we'll get started with the warm-up. So I said review askr and nya dhatus on page 40 and 42 of book 1. So if you look at book 1, page 40, you can see as dhatu and kr dhatu. So the main ones we want to know are the corners, right? The pratama purusha ekavachanam, pratama purusha bahuvachanam, and then uttama purusha ekavachanam and uttama purusha bahuvachanam. So for as dhatu, we have asti, which is pratama purusha ekavachanam, and santi, pratama purusha bahuvachanam. Then uttama purusha first person singular is asmi, and pratama purusha bahuvachanam is smaha. So asti, santi, asmi, smaha. Okay. So then we look at the next one is kru dhatu. Now there's two forms of kru dhatu because it's ubhayapadi, meaning it takes parasmaipada suffixes and atmanepada type suffixes. So it has two forms. So we look at the first form. The first corner, pratama purusha ekavachanam is karoti. Then the next corner, kurvanti. Then the bottom left corner, karomi. And the bottom right corner, kurmaha. Okay, so that's parasmaipada. And then we look at atmanepadani. So kurute, then kurvate, then kurve, and kurmahe. Just to note, we see the parasmaipada more often usually in this kru dhatu, but there's no really reason for that. Just so you know. And then the last one, nya dhatu. Nya dhatu is on page 41. So janati, and next corner, jananti, janami, and janimaha. That one's a little bit of janimaha. Okay, so let's continue from there. We're on the last little part of learning our verbs for this whole book. Okay, so we're on our last part of learning about verbs in this part. So verbs, right? Tingantam padam are made up of dhatu plus ting pratyaya, but we need to look at some dhatus which are common but don't follow the same patterns as we've seen before. So that's why we were looking at that. So the next one we need to see is ap dhatu. So this is also on page 41 of book 1. Ap dhatu looks like this. So you can repeat after me. So ap dhatu, let's just look at it. It means to pervade. So you'll hear this a lot in Vedanta class, to pervade. Like Atma apnoti. Atma pervades all. Brahman apnoti. Brahman pervades. So you'll see this this verb a lot in Vedanta class. So that's why this is put here. So so what we can do is if you have your workbook, this is also in your workbook. So page 43 of your workbook. If you want to pull that up, page 43 of your workbook. And what I'll do is I'll share my camera with you again, and we can do this together. Make it a little bit bigger screen, 1 second. Sorry, it's a little bit dark. I'm not quite sure why the lighting is a little bit off today, but you see abdat there, to pervade, in lat kartari, lat lakara, present tense, kartari prayoga, active voice. So let's just, so ekavachanam, dvivachanam, and bahuvachanam. And then pratama purusha. So you usually want to write out the whole thing, but just for time, I'm just cutting it short. Madhyama purusha and uttama purusha. Okay, so for ap dhatu in pratama purusha ekavachanam is apnoti. So notice how there's a nakara that gets added here. So ap, and then this half nakara gets added here. So it's ap dhatu, but then we add this half nakara, so apna, and then oti, apnoti. Let's just do the corners again. Then up, nu. So same thing, we add the nakara, apnu, then vanti. Uttama purusha ekavachanam, apnomi. And the last one, apnumaha. Okay, so we only wrote in this thing, but actually let's look at page 41 and let's chant all of them together. So you can repeat after me. Apnoti, apnuta, okay. Apnoti, apnutaha, apnuvanti. I'll do the whole row. Apnoshi, apnutaha, apnutha. Apnomi, apnuvaha, apnumaha. And here we're only looking at the top four. So apnoti, apnuvanti, apnomi, and apnumaha. Okay, these are just some things to know. I know it's not particularly that exciting, but they just come up very commonly, so that's why we're looking at them. We'll do one more and then we'll stop for today. So let's look at vid dhatu, vid, to know, to p, in lat kartari prayoga. Now, there's two forms for each person and number. So it's not Ubayapadi, but still you get two forms. Let's just, I'll show you what I mean. So, for example, the first one, Veda or Veti. And you see both of these very commonly. Notice how it's half takara. So it's, if you would write it in transliteration, Veti. Meaning he knows. He, she, it knows. Because it's vid, to know. Then viduhu or vidanti. Viduhu or vidanti. This is they all know. Then Veda or Vidmaha. How to write that half makara? Like, so you can either do it like they did, or you can just do it like this. Draw this virama and then Vidmaha. So I know. And then oh, sorry, I made a mistake. I was was remembering the wrong form. So let's cross this one out. Veda or Vedmi. Again, you can write it like this. So Veda or Vedmi, I know. And then Vidmaha, this is what I was thinking of before. Vidmaha or Vidaha. Vidma, sorry. Vidma or Vidmaha. So we know. Okay, so Veda, Veti, Viduhu, Vidanti, Veda or Vedmi, Vidmaha or Vidma. Now, all four of these, right, it doesn't matter which form you can put up there. So it can be either form for each of these. So there's no particular preference for the form for either of these. Okay. Hariprasad ji, you have a question?
Yes, sir. What is the difference between apnoti and prapnoti?
Yeah, apnoti and prapnoti are the same thing. The only difference is you get the upasarga pra.
Okay.
So if we add the upasarga pra plus ap, then you get prapnoti, etc. So that pra doesn't really add much meaning. Sometimes you can say it pervades, and then pra will add the meaning of very well. So it pervades very well. Prapnoti.
Oh, no. What you say pervades, it is to gain, right?
Yeah, sometimes, okay, so yeah, that's a good question. So, yeah, so prapnoti could mean to pervade, but yeah, sometimes when we add that upasarga, it also means to gain.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it also, when we add that upasarga, it can also mean to gain. So you get both meanings though. So prapnoti can also mean to pervade very well.
I see.
Or
okay.
It can mean to gain.
Okay, thank you.
Because if you think about it, if you pervade something very well, it means you gain it, if you think of it like that. But let's keep it two separate meanings.
Okay.
Yeah. There's one more question. It says, is Uttamar Purusha and Pratama Purusha Ekavachanam is the same for Veda, for Vedatu? So Uttama Purusha and Pratama Purusha Ekavachanam is the same. So it says Veda or Veda, correct. So they're the same thing, Veda or Veda. Same thing. So how do you know which one it is when you're seeing a sentence? You have to look at the subject of the verb. Is the subject singular or plural? But, right, both. So depending on the subject, you'll get a different meaning for these two. So you have to look at the context. But yes, they are the same. Okay, so now I want to skip ahead and I want to switch topics. So I want to switch back to verbs, what we were talking about, or nouns, what we were talking about last time. So in your book, you can flip to page 67. Page 67 of your book 1. page 67 of book 1. So 67 of book 1 and page 58 of the workbook. Page 58 of the workbook. Okay, so 67 and then 58. Now, in that, on page 67, you'll see this on the first page. So constituents of a noun. So what we've seen before is that a noun So a noun is also called a subantam. Right? Subantam padam. And this can refer to people, places, or things, right? It can be a tree. It can be a person, or it can be any kind of object, right? It's a noun. Now this noun has two parts. It is prati padikam. So we have to know this word, pratipadikam. And the English translation for pratipadikam is nominal base. Nominal means noun. So it's a noun base, basically, we could say. So nominal base. So when we make noun into an adjective, it's called nominal. So a noun type base. And then the suffix is what we call sup. Sup pratyaya. Now this sup pratyaya, also called a nominal suffix, so because the word ends with sup, we say the word is an. So it says sup anta. It's ending with sup because every word will end with sup type suffix, right? That's why it's called supantam. Or when we take the phonetical change, it becomes subhantam. Okay, so now we need to look at each of these two parts, number 1 and number 2. We need to look at pratipadikam and then supratyayaha. So let's look at the first one. Okay, so it's in your workbook, it says it has these two things, classification of pratipadika. So pratipadika are classified in two ways. The first way that it's classified is by gender. Right? It's by gender. And the gender is masculine, feminine, or neuter. But we want, when we're looking at a pratipadika, we need to know these two pieces of information. What is its gender? And what is the ending letter of the pratipadika? The ending letter of the pratika. So you need to know these two things. So now we have that equation. We have the equation of pratipadika plus supratyaya. Now within pratipadika, we need to look at these two things, gender and ending letter. Why those are important is because we group different pratipadikas based on the gender and ending letter. And the patterns of the words with the same gender and ending letter will look the same. So I'll show you some examples in a minute. Okay, so in Sanskrit, there's 3 genders for the nouns: masculine, feminine, and neuter. Okay, now we need to know the vocabulary for each of these. So I'm going to put it in here. Okay, so masculine is what we call punlingaha. Actually, I'm just going to do this to save some time. But here you can write it in your chart. So the masculine is what we call punlingaha. Pumlingaha. So repeat after me. Punlingaha. So masculine. Linga means gender. Linga means gender. What kind of gender? Pum, masculine. Same thing, feminine. Lingaha, gender. What kind? Stri. So repeat after me. Stri lingaha. And then the last one, neuter. Lingaha, gender. And then napumsaka. So you can repeat after me. Napumsaka lingaha. This one's a little bit harder to pronounce. Napumsaka. Napumsaka. Okay. So masculine gender, pullingaha, feminine gender, strilingaha, and neuter gender, napumsakalingaha. Okay, so within the noun, we have to look at the gender and the gender of these 3 types. Okay, the reason why this is important is when we add a pratipadika plus a supratyaya, it will decline, right? It will change forms, and the gender is very important the gender is very important to how it declines, if that makes sense. The gender is very significant to informing how it declines. Okay, so every pratipadika has genders in these 2 types of way. So one is that some pratipadikas, Bhagwan has given the gender. So it's just there. So some just naturally have one of the 3 genders. So let's look at examples for that. So in your book, you'll see on page 69 at the bottom, these are some words that naturally have their gender. So vriksha, tree, is a masculine pratipadika. Mala is a feminine pratipadika. Phala, fruit, is a neuter pratipadika, etc., etc. So all of these words just naturally are given a gender. So each of these just have their own gender, and we don't need to think too much about why. I mean, sometimes the gender matches up with the cultural stereotype for that thing. So flowers may be seen as feminine, so garland is feminine. But we need to look at this last point here. Gender of pratipadika and actual gender of the meaning don't always match. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And the example is given of dhara. So dhara is wife is a masculine pratipadika. So they're not going to make it easy. Yeah. So there's different words for wife. And so there are words for wife that are feminine, but this word, this pratipadika, happens to be masculine. So it doesn't always match up with the meaning. Okay. Now the next type of how we get gender is some don't have gender of their own. Okay. Some words don't have a gender of their own. Now then how do we know the gender of the word? I'm going to make this a little bit simpler than it is in the book. So we have an adjective and we have a substantive. So let's say, let me look at the example in the book. So it says, Dirgaha vrikshaha, a tall tree. Dirga, and then vriksha. Okay, so this adjective is qualifying the substantive. It is telling us what type of tree. What type of tree? It's saying tall tree. Now, because it is qualifying or pointing to this substantive, it gets the gender of the substantive. So the adjective will get the gender of the substantive. So this tree happens to be masculine. Because dirga is qualifying or pointing at vriksha, it will also then become masculine. So depending on what it's pointing to. Okay. Next example that they give is Shukla Mala. Mala means garland, right? Flower garland, let's say. Necklace. Now, mala, garland, happens to be feminine. Now, what type of mala? Shukla, white. And so, because this is qualifying this, it is an adjective for this, it becomes feminine. But we can mix this up. Let's say that I say Shukla Vrikshaha. If I say white tree, so sorry, this should be Shukla Langa. Now this Shukla, this is the Pratipadika. Now when I add Shukla, let's say to Vrikshaha, which is masculine, it will look a little bit different. Instead of becoming Shukla, it will become Shuklaha because it's masculine. Because this is masculine, the adjective will also become masculine. Here it's feminine, mala, so then it has to become Shukla. But the Pratipadika itself is just Shukla. Does anybody have any questions so far? So Shukla is the Pratipadika, but it becomes differentiated based on what it's qualifying. And then there's a slight form difference. So it becomes Shukla or Shuklaha, depending on what it's qualifying. Okay, another example that they give is Phalam Patitam in the book. Phalam Patitam, the fruit has fallen. Now the fruit is neuter, and so patitam, fallen, adjective will also become neuter. Okay, so I think we get the idea that either the gender is natural or it depends on what it's qualifying. Okay, so there's some words that are just natural and there's some words which don't have an inherent gender, but depend on what it's qualifying. Okay, Hariprasadji, you have a question?
Yes, sir. So that means to say the qualifying gets qualified gender.
Correct.
Okay.
Qualifying word gets the qualified gender.
Okay.
The adjective gets the gender of the substantive.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
But there's only some words that do that. For For example, these words here, dirga, shukla, patita. But there's some words which have a gender and don't change their gender, like the ones we said earlier. So like vriksha, mala, phala on the previous page, those just have a gender and do not change genders based on qualifying or qualified.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the next thing we need to look at is, right, we need to look at gender. We also need to look at the ending letter of a pratipadika. Ending letter. So when we look at the pratipadika, we have to look at what is the last letter or the last two letters of the pratipadika. Sometimes we need more than one. So conventionally, letters in Sanskrit are named by adding kara at the end. Kara. So a is called akara. A is called akara. Sa is called sakara. We just add this kara at the end to refer to that letter. Okay, to that letter by itself, not. So if I want to say sakara, really what I'm saying is the letter sa. So I can say pakara, which is the letter pa. And they're given names according to the gender and the ending letter. So Rama, for example, here. So Rama is ending with, is masculine, and it ends with akara. So if I want to say this all in Sanskrit, I would say akara. It's ending with that akara, so anta. And then masculine, punlingaha. Then pratipadikam. Oh, I didn't fit it. Okay, so pratipadika, which is masculine, and it is ending with a. Anta means ending with, akara means a. So if I want to say Rama, I'll say akaranta punlinga pratipadikam. Okay, let's say I want to say mala. Mala is a ending, and it is feminine. So I would say akara anta strilinga, and then pratipadikam. And because of a sandhi, we can make akaranta. So we would make it akaranta. So akaranta strilinga pratipadikam. Okay, so can you tell me in the chat if I want to say, let's say the word, okay, so jnana. Jnana is akaranta napumsakalinga. So can you tell me in the chat how I would say all of the details for that pratipadika? I know it's a little bit hard to type, but try your best. Okay, I'm starting to see some things in the chat. Okay, so akaranta, yep. Napumsakaling, akaranta, napumsakalinga, pratipadikam. Nice. Okay, so everyone who wrote it did a great job. Okay, we're almost done with this topic 7. So next time we'll pick up and we'll finish with topic 7, and then we'll finally get to Rama Shabda. So we're almost there. Okay, so we'll take a 5-minute break. We'll start at 8:11. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. So we'll pick up with the Sadhana Panchakam class at 8:11. Let me know if you have any questions. Just my video is off right now.